Welcome back to another episode of the Dunwoody Dialogues. I am Mark Galvin, your host, and this show is produced by Discover Dunwoody. So you know what we do here. We like to bring in very important people and talk to them. And as a matter of fact, in the past, we have so many great people that we have interviewed. So be sure to page down and look for all the great people we've talked to in the past. There are so many super folks. And matter of fact, one of them is Billy Kramer. And we don't want you to watch that video. We want you to watch this video and share it with everyone. And you'll learn more about that, why. And if you don't know who Billy Kramer is, that's okay. You don't need to look until after you watch this whole video. Today's guest, I'd like to call him a revivalist. He owns the Hyperlocal News and is trying to keep it alive. So, all of you, welcome our guest today, Mr. Keith Pepper. Keith, welcome.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having us. For having me.
Wait a minute. I don't know this. Do you have a couple of personalities here?
I do not have a couple of personalities. I have a big team, so I feel like the whole team is here with me today.
I love that.
And we're gunning for more views than Billy. So thank you guys for watching. Although now I know where I'm headed to lunch after this.
I think that's fantastic. So we're all fans of Billy Kramer. And right before the show started, I love this. Keith said, "You said, hey, I want to make sure we get more views than Billy Kramer's show. So we're going to do that for you. So we'll put some money behind this. We'll advertise this. We'll go into the Dunwoody Reporter and make sure everybody gets a link."
Perfect.
Does that work?
I love it.
So let me tell you a little bit about Keith. This gentleman is the owner and publisher of Rough Draft Atlanta. And I love that because Rough Draft Atlanta has a number of properties. I call it a property. Is that how you refer to it?
Yeah, publications, properties.
Perfect. And those are all of them reporters: the Dunwoody Reporter, Brookhaven, Buckhead, Intown, Sandy Springs, and brand new, you've heard it here first, the new Tucker Reporter, which I love because I live in Tucker myself. So we love that you're doing that. Why do you do all these local newspapers, I'm going to call it for this time? And it's an online piece too. But why go local versus something that's more regional focused?
Yeah, so we kind of have a combination of both. So when I moved back to Atlanta in 2019 and purchased the company that was previously known as Springs Publishing, that had started as the Sandy Springs Reporter newspaper and then had launched in Sandy Springs, Buckhead, and then expanded to Brookhaven and Dunwoody. That company was basically a print-only company. It had a website, but very little revenue, kind of a disjointed presence online.
Okay.
So this was in 2020, and when I
Wow.
purchased it, so it was the height of the pandemic, and obviously the news industry and the print newspaper industry in particular was not headed in the upward and to the right direction. So, but there still is a great market for people that want to know what's happening in their communities. So the hyperlocal, even though on a macro level there are a ton of headwinds about news consumption, the business of news is extremely difficult. On a hyperlocal level, we find that people are willing to engage, are willing to read. They want to know what's happening with their city council, with local restaurants, with real estate. So we think it's a great market to continue to invest in and continue to build in getting folks that hyperlocal news around what they're doing. So we continue to print and distribute print papers into those markets.
Okay.
Online and through other distribution channels like email, we're beginning to consolidate things into one website, and that's the brand that we created called Rough Draft Atlanta, that has different sections for each area, but we direct the audience and direct the traffic into one website.
So I think this is brilliant, and we all need local news, and there are things that you cover that happen in the city council meetings all over for all these cities, which people need to know about, because quite frankly, I'd argue these are things that directly impact them more than what's happening in Washington. So you really know a lot about Atlanta. You're an Atlanta native. You shared before that you went to a Sandy Springs high school. Which high school?
Riverwood.
And has Riverwood been renovated at all? Or is it the same building the whole time?
Oh no, it's been renovated. Big
Oh, okay.
time.
So
Yeah,
you can't
yeah.
go to the
When I
old
went
building and walk the
no.
halls and say, this is where this happened.
No, no. When I went to Riverwood, there were no windows, so it was
Wow.
and it's been dramatically renovated.
Well, it probably needed it if there were no windows. And you spent 25 plus years in local and global media. In fact, you started when you were 16 at WSB Radio, which for anyone outside the Atlanta area, WSB is, there's really, I think it's probably one of the best far-reaching radios stations in the nation. I get the feeling it's probably pretty big. Is that true?
Yeah, I think absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, heritage-wise, just the history of it, the talent that's come through there, and the shows that have launched, and just the reach, especially in the Atlanta market, is
Right.
I think it's unmatched.
Yeah, they have a great product, and still do. And then you went to New York, spent a lot of time in New York City working on digital media startups like Hitwise, Experian, Marketing Services, and Outbrain. And then you came local. It's interesting, I didn't know that you started during COVID. So you had some headwinds there, and here you are today. We work with you guys and like the reach you have. But I kind of want to dial back a little bit and ask you a little bit to kind of describe what you do specifically, if there's, and you've covered a little bit already, but more importantly, why are you doing this?
So I grew up in a media-obsessed family or household. We, from a very early age, we were the family that listened in the mornings to WSB Radio, at night watched the news together. We got every morning in our house 3 newspapers delivered to the driveway, and then I
Which
personally.
newspapers?
So there was USA Today, there was the Wall Street Journal, and then of course the Atlanta Constitution. I was so obsessed during high school that I personally paid to get the Atlanta Journal delivered in the afternoons.
Wow.
So we got 4 newspapers delivered. So,
And this is a bit of a throwback too, because the Constitution used to be the morning paper and the Journal was the PM paper.
that's right.
And so now they've merged. Isn't that
Yeah,
interesting?
yeah.
Back in the day, there were 2 papers delivered.
Yeah, and there were multiple editions of each paper as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different world. But so that was how I grew up, and then began working when I was 16 at WSB as an intern. Just literally parked myself there and would do whatever. Taught myself how to operate the board and produce shows, and eventually was covering sports and producing sports shows. So I was just an obsessed kid and did all that through college. Went to the University of Georgia. Would come back on the weekends and summers and worked at WSB. And then after college, I traveled for a year. So I saw more of the world than I had seen
nice.
as a student. And then I came back and I worked on the morning show. So I produced the morning show in 1994, 95.
Wait, you were literally the producer for the
for
morning
the
show.
Atlanta's morning news. So I
Wow.
would wake up every day at 3. It's not the ideal lifestyle for
Yeah.
someone that's
Yeah, but so
24 at the
cool.
time, 23.
Yeah.
So it was fun, but I kind of burnt out, and I'd always wanted to get into sales and more on the business side, which was hard to do because I was seen as this producer kid. And so I left, pursued some graduate studies, and ended up in New York in 1999. And it was the beginning of the first .com boom.
Right.
And so got a job in sales, in global sales for a company that was doing internet research at the time. So it was basically a bunch of smart kids that would sit in a room and talk about how the internet was going to impact business, and then write reports and sell that research to big corporations to help them adapt to the internet. So this model of syndicated research. So I got into sales on that side and got to travel the world.
I was going to say, you probably are extremely successful because that was clearly something businesses wanted to know more about.
Yeah, I mean, businesses would spend lots of money to buy this research and get access to our analysts to just talk to them about how to adapt to the internet. So that was in a pre 9/11 New York. So I was enjoyed, did a lot of international travel, great experience. And then after that, that company was called Jupiter. I worked after that was with an Australian company, where I also got great international experience, and then eventually, as you mentioned, to with Outbrain, who also exposed me more to publishing, working directly with internet publishers, digital publishers, and so I got the bug when I got back to Atlanta to never had really lost the news obsession. I've just always followed the news and been interested in it. And when I had the opportunity to buy the company that had the papers, I thought to myself, this is interesting, and it relit that passion that I had for Atlanta and Atlanta news and the industry. But I went to a bunch of friends because this was in 2020 during the pandemic.
So had the pandemic started before you decided to pull the trigger?
Mm-hmm, the pandemic started. We started talking in January of 2020.
Okay.
And then we didn't quite get to an agreement. And then the pandemic started, and so I paused and thought, wow, I dodged a bullet here.
Right.
And then we kept in touch through the pandemic, through the first few months, and the company weathered the pandemic, and so then we restarted the conversation in the fall. And I went to friends, people who had known me for 4 months and people that had known me for 40 years. And I said, I have this idea, but I need you to talk me out of it because this is going to sound crazy.
Give me some challenges.
And
sure.
everybody said, sounds like you got a great idea. And,
wow.
Was able to work out a deal that made sense financially. And so we closed the deal at the end of 2020. So it was the pandemic had very much been going.
So you had to do a lot of research, I'm sure. That year-long process really had you look in at media, news media. So can you give me a summary? What do you think is the current state of news media?
Yeah, so the current state on a macro level
sure.
is very difficult. There are a lot of headwinds. There are a few big media companies that are doing very, very well.
Okay.
The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. It's a short list. People that can get folks to pay for subscriptions, to pay
right.
for content. Then it really gets much more difficult in the middle ground, right? So the mediums, and you can see this if you're following the news, right? We're talking in the middle of June right now, where the Washington Post is going through a lot of turmoil. Their audience has been halved. Their revenues, they lost, I think, $70 million last year.
Oh, my goodness.
So you see that there are a lot of challenges, and those challenges come from the business model being disrupted by digital marketing. So, advertisers can go to the big platforms, Google, Facebook, and get
we're doing that.
Right. I mean, you guys can get, for direct response advertising, you can get the reach that no media company other than the couple that we mentioned can deliver.
Right.
And so when you layer the business challenges and the consumer behavior is changing so much,
mm-hmm.
so we see a lot of news avoidance. So people, I think that
that's news to
previous,
me. That is news on the news.
Yeah, no pun intended.
People are avoiding news now.
People are avoiding news, and you see that, you see that in the Washington Post numbers. But if you look at any independent study of traffic to news websites, it's down. And part of that was there was a massive bump during the Trump administration in particular, because there was a lot of news coming. Right, there's a lot of news coming fast and furious, and then the pandemic. And so post the pandemic, post Trump, there was a huge drop off in news consumption. And so that's why you see companies like the New York Times, like the Wall Street Journal, diversifying their content. So a lot of the growth, if you dig into the numbers behind the New York Times success, a lot of the growth and audience engagement is coming not from people reading about politics or people reading about the war in the Middle East or the war in Ukraine. It's coming from people playing Wordle, people playing Connections, a little bit from sports. So they acquired a company called The Athletic.
Oh, yeah.
So that, and recipes, so food content.
Recipes.
Right. So that's what's driving the growth of.
And I'm going to tell you, this is interesting to me specifically because you just hit the things that I find interesting.
Right.
So I absolutely pay for a subscription to the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
I am absolutely reading The Athletic. It's one of the places I prefer to get my sports news from. because of the way they write their sports news, I think is very, it seems more effective. It seems like they're more honest. It feels like they're doing a better job of getting to the information. And then my wife loves the recipes thing. I constantly, something pops up on my feed like, oh, honey, you got to check out this recipe. So it's interesting that's, and I think they're all valuable. So I can totally see that.
Right. So you're willing to pay for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they've got you in a habit, whether the habit is because of the athletic, whether the habit is because of recipes, or for a lot of people the habit is because of Wordle. They've got you in there. So they've created.
I'm not doing the Wordle thing. Maybe I should do that.
You should try it. So they've created that habit. And with any media, with any, where you're trying to build an audience, right? So we think about it in terms of how can we develop an audience, because then that's valuable to marketers, right? So we can deliver that. And the audience of the New York Times is massive and it's global.
Yeah.
But for a local advertiser, a local marketer, it may be out of reach in terms of how expensive that is to market to.
Or it doesn't make sense for me.
Right.
Or it really doesn't. Right. My audience is very well defined.
Correct.
And that's why we work with you. You get to that audience. That's important to us. We don't need to reach a New York Times audience.
Right. So I have a sticker on my laptop or my monitor at home that says meaningful, not massive.
Right.
And that really defines, to answer the long route to get to your question, which is around the passion. For me, it's about building something. I wanted to come back to Atlanta. I wanted to be engaged in the local community.
Okay.
I had traveled. I'd spent years traveling the world. It's an amazing experience. I love being in other countries and other cultures, but I wanted to be local. So I value that I can walk into coffee shops, restaurants, dry cleaners, and know the community. And so that, to me, has been just an incredibly valuable piece of what we've been doing. So we've been, as a business, we have bucked the trend and we're doing well. We've grown each of the first 3 years, both
That's
our
fantastic.
audience, our revenues. And so that's critical because we have to be sustainable, right? The example I told you about the Washington Post, losing $70 million is not something that a lot of businesses can absorb.
Oh my goodness!
Right. So
could you imagine? No. I hear about that because I did own my own company for 7 years and thought, my gosh, if I could have had that $70 million that they lost, I could have done amazing things.
Yeah, I can't imagine losing any money. So that to me is a non-starter. And so we've, from the beginning, it's been a goal to be to deliver a public service and deliver content, a great product, and non-sensational, responsible content to the community, but do it in a way that we don't need to be massive, but we have to be profitable, we have to be sustainable as a business.
Yeah. One of the things we've talked about, some of the major publications, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's already come up. Do you think print news is going to be around in, say, 15, 20 years, or do you think it'll go away altogether?
Yeah, I think it'll be around. I think it will dramatically change.
Because you've got a print piece too, right? So this impacts you as well.
Yeah, and we have a print piece that is we print monthly. We distribute. So the way that we do our print is we distribute it through direct mail to the communities that we cover. So if you live in Dunwoody, if you live in Sandy Springs, Intown, etc., you get the paper in the mail through direct mail. So
and so how do you get all those addresses? You can buy addresses. Do you go to a service and say, give me everybody's address in Dunwoody? You don't even need names. You just need to know physical addresses.
That's right. So we do it through the USPS and through a program called Every Door Direct.
Got it.
So we pay to distribute it. So it's it's obviously incredibly expensive.
Sure.
The print industry has changed dramatically in many ways. One is consumer behavior has changed, right? So the example I gave you earlier of me getting 4 newspapers a day at my house doesn't exist. The prices of print, both the paper and the process of printing it have gone up dramatically.
Wow.
For reasons that make sense and also will blow your mind. So the war in Ukraine, the raw pulp that comes to make paper products, a lot of it comes from Russia and Ukraine.
Wow.
So during the war, that went up. The supply chain stuff during the pandemic impacted it. And then a lot of printing presses, or a lot of places that make newsprint, so the factories before the printing press that make the newsprint, a lot of those during the pandemic closed and transitioned to make cardboard because e-commerce has been spiking, and so people would buy more boxes and less papers. So all those things contribute to making print difficult. But I think still for us and for companies that do print, it's incredibly valuable to advertisers because it's a product. If you create a good product in print, right, we're delivering it to the mailbox, so it's getting into homes. It's full color, it's high quality, it's stapled. It looks like almost like a magazine.
Right.
Those are still valuable products to people, and I think people value that. And the content's decent. Now, if you open our paper, because we only print monthly, there's no breaking news that's in there, right? So I don't think it's a sustainable model for breaking news anymore. But I do think that you'll start to see dailies, I think, go to maybe once or twice a week, maybe a weekend edition, something where people can sit back, more of a lean back exercise. It's still incredibly valuable to readers because it's something that, hey, I may have seen that come across my feed during the week, but I didn't get a chance to dig into it. For advertisers. And so a lot of our advertising is for events, a lot of it is for real estate. And one of the most compelling things I think for people when they pick up our paper is, hey, I want to look at the houses that are for sale in my neighborhood or in my community, because it's the one thing in American culture, and particularly in Atlanta, that is acceptable to be voyeuristic about is real estate, right?
Yes.
So
what is my neighbor's house going for?
Right. I could ask you what you paid for your house, and it wouldn't be super awkward because I could just go look it up.
Right.
And it's the kind of thing that people just really love to see, or love to engage with.
Especially for homeowners. They want to know what the other homes are going for.
Especially for homeowners and for aspirational homeowners.
Oh, okay. Good.
It's just one of those things that's like a sport, and especially in the Atlanta market, for both good and not so great reasons. In terms of housing prices and housing stock and that there are a lot of issues behind that, but from an advertising business, it's good. So
I think this is so interesting, and you talk about the type of news you covered. You covered our ReDiscover Dunwoody trolley tour, and that is the kind of information that Dunwoodians would like to know about, that this is a service that the city is offering. It's not breaking news by any means, but you also have built relationships with other media outlets like the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, because they picked up the news and they dropped that on a Saturday piece. And one of our staff members' email was in it, and she is thrilled. She's still getting emails from them. But it does show some of the ways that a local person could see, okay, this trolley's happening, and how can I sign up for it? And they want to join that. Well, that is something that can directly get involved in. And I think that that's really important. Then the flip side is that I know you guys will cover what's going on with police departments locally and some of that information. I think that is, as I drive down the road and I see, some of the activity the police are doing, how do flock cameras impact me as a citizen of Dunwoody? You guys cover that type of information, and I think that's really valuable because we need to know that.
Yeah, the way we think about it is there's a continuum of topics, right? So on one side, there's local government, school board, police stuff that is critical to society, right? And you can read a lot and see a lot that democracy is at risk because that piece of that side of the continuum is very difficult. That's the part that's an incredibly hard business for news, right? So if we only covered school board stuff, it would be great for democracy, but it would be really bad for business.
Right.
On the other side of the continuum are things like real estate, food, art. So what restaurants are opening.
And you're able to see that people want to engage with this type of content too.
Correct, right. So we see that continuum. So we see very few people interacting over here, or less and less, fewer and fewer people interacting over here because of what we talked about around news avoidance. People are just stressed. And then we see tons of people interacting with stuff over here. And so my goal and the goal of the team is to be in the middle. How do we make sure that on balance, we're in the middle of that continuum? And so that's what we strive for.
And that's got to be a struggle, I would think. How do I continue to balance? And you've also got to watch those metrics, right? Because eventually somebody, news may go up a little bit as we get closer to the next election.
Yeah, and we go through internal discussions about how do we balance that, because it's sending someone to cover every school board meeting or every city council meeting in 5 or 6 communities is expensive.
Oh yeah,
because you got to sit through a lot of school board meetings or city council meetings where nothing happens.
Right.
And so we think about what's our role in the marketplace, and I think you hit on something earlier, which is important, has been important to me from the very beginning, which is around partnerships. How do we work with other news organizations to cover things that people care about, and then to distribute it to people, right? Because the distribution has upended the news industry, because you can get our news on Apple News, on Google News, on Smart News, on many aggregators, and you may never come to our site, or we have people that read our emails, our newsletters, and never come to our website.
So I think that's so interesting, and you talk about newsletters, and I want to jump into that.
Yeah.
Because we have a newsletter here at Discover Dunwoody. How important is your newsletter for you, and how have you formatted that newsletter to meet what you've determined is the need?
Yeah, so the newsletter to us is probably our most important product.
Wow.
And products, because we have many of them. And the reason is because the newsletter has become the new morning paper. So when you wake up in the morning, when I was a kid, I would go out to the driveway and I would get the paper because I wanted to see papers because I wanted to see what the score was, what was happening, and that was how you got the news.
I totally forgot about that. That's right. I used to run to see what the Braves game, what the score of the game was in the paper.
Yeah. So now, what a lot of people do, and I know this both firsthand and people tell us, is they roll over and they pick up their phone, and they open their phone, and they open one of the first apps you may open is your email. And so for us, and this goes back to my radio producing days of being a morning show producer, one of the things that makes morning shows, whether it's TV or radio, so successful is consistency, right? So no matter how routine oriented you are, you're probably most routine oriented in the mornings. So that every day at a certain time, it's going to be the weather, it's going to be the traffic. So we approach our newsletters as the new morning paper. So because we print only monthly, I look at newsletters as that's our morning paper. So
it's kind of your way to stay in touch with your audience throughout the month.
Exactly. And it gives us a chance to touch our audience every day, give advertisers a way to be in front of our audience every day at the same time, and also very formulaic. And the newsletters always look the same. There's a routine to the week. So on Mondays, we do podcast suggestions and we do global news updates. On Tuesdays,
podcasts.
Yeah, this will be in there. On Tuesdays, we do volunteer opportunities with Hands on Atlanta. And also we do a partnership with GPB to promote one of their stories. So for us, it's a way we've aggregated a pretty large audience for our morning newsletter, and so then the way that we format it is I don't want it to be a newsletter just of links where you have to click through. I want you to be able to read our newsletter, get what you need out of just reading it, and if you want to go deeper, you can click through. But I really don't, other than advertisers, I don't look at the click-through metrics that much.
So your newsletter is, I get it, I read it, I don't have to click over and go to the website to see more. So you're not just doing headlines, you're doing mini articles. Is that the right way to put that?
Yeah, we're doing about, I think the word count is up to 90 words in a main story, and then we do a couple sentences for other things.
This is kind of like that sidebar that the Wall Street Journal does, where you can read through and see what's in the Wall Street Journal. Yeah. And I could actually get my entire news from the Wall Street Journal just by reading that sidebar, which is what you're doing in your newsletter.
Yeah, and that reflects a trend that people just don't read. I mean, we've become
that's a shame, isn't it? Yeah. It's very true, but it's certainly a shame.
We've become a society where we want it in 140 characters, or we want it in just a headline. And so, instead of fighting that trend and trying to shove hard news or bad news or long form stuff down people's into their emails, we're saying, hey, we're going to embrace it, and we're going to give you the best possible product, and our advertisers the best possible product, uncluttered, really high impact ad units. So that's the goal of it.
So I'm a member of the Dunwoody Rotary Club, and no joke, your paper, among others, comes up in conversations where locals like Dunwoody Rotary says, how do we get into those local papers? So how does an organization, and there's all these civic groups, they would like, what is their number one goal? Membership, right? And you look at a group like a Rotary, they tend to be older, so they're trying to find how can they connect with those folks. What is the answer for those civic groups? How can they get coverage from your paper?
Yeah, so the best way is to make sure that we know what's going on. So we do have a reporter that covers Dunwoody, Kathy Cobbs. She's been in the community for,
I know Kathy.
I won't say how long, but she's incredible, a huge resource to us. So she has her pulse on Dunwoody, but one of the changes in the news industry is that we don't have a team of people covering Dunwoody. I wish that we could. So the best way is to just reach out to Kathy and get it into her.
That's good.
Into her inbox, make sure she knows about it. Obviously, that's
and
on
how much time in advance should they do that, right? So let's say they have an event coming up and they want to try to get coverage. They should make sure, and I'm saying I think a PR release is the right way to reach out to her. Sending her a note, say, hey, this is coming up. How far in advance do you think she should know?
Yeah, so if they want it in print, which a lot of the Rotary probably does, it needs to be, we go to print on the last Wednesday of every month for the Dunwoody Reporter. So the sooner the better. But for digital, we obviously we're posting multiple times a day on our website, and so as much warning as possible. But obviously there's things that Kathy covers that haven't even happened yet today, and will be in tomorrow's newsletter. So the most advanced warning is best, but we try to cover breaking news as much as we can.
I did not ask you about this before, and that is about AI. And so, for example, one of the best things that I shared with our Rotary is you can write a PR release so easy today by going into one of the AI systems and saying, write a PR release and plug in your information, and the data will come out, and it's really nice. And for an organization like that, all volunteers, it's fantastic. There are news aggregators, I hear, and I don't know who they are, that do what you're doing, but it's all AI. How do you compete with those groups that have AI systems out there? I guess they're grabbing information that's on the internet and spitting out an article. How do you compete with that? Or do you think that's even a competitor?
I don't think it's a competitor. I think there are sites that pop up all over the place all the time that scrape our content, repost it just as is, or turn it into their own story. We don't have the resources, or it doesn't affect our business that we're spending a lot of time worrying about that. But it's a problem on a larger scale. It's a problem probably more for global and national news than something that I worry about. I worry about it as the industry. So I'm also the chair of the Atlanta Press Club. When I put my hat on for the Atlanta Press Club, I think it's a big problem. But
that should be in your bio, by the way. You're the chair for the Atlanta Press Club. That's big. He's the chair for the Atlanta Press Club.
That should be. I know. I need to hire a marketing person.
That's right. That's
but
exactly right.
that should be on there. So it's a problem, and it's going to be a bigger problem in the next few months with the election and deep fakes and AI.
Oh my goodness.
But I think for us, the way I think about AI is we don't use it to create content. We've all been using it for years to edit, spell check, to make things a little bit more concise.
Grammarly is a good example.
Grammarly is a great example of AI. Sure. We use it to, when I write a lot on LinkedIn. I'll put my post, I'll write it and put it in there and say, hey, if you were a business professor, what would you say about this? Or if you were a journalism professor, what would you say about this? So it's incredibly useful to get feedback and to iterate on things. But where I'm most interested in AI is how can we use it on our business process more? So as our sales team, how can we look at creating campaigns that we can reach out to businesses across the metro area and use it to be more efficient in how we conduct our business? It's because the more money that we can the more time and money that we can save operationally, we can invest into our journalism, and then we can have more people covering Dunwoody and covering Sandy Springs, et cetera. So
I think that's brilliant. Yeah, I don't think it's a question of whether we all are impacted by AI. We will be. We are.
Yeah.
We use AI here at Discover Dunwoody frequently, and it makes life go a lot faster for us. We had to figure out how to rewrite the letter that we sent to our tour guides for our ReDiscover Dunwoody trolley tour, and we came up with a series of bullets that we need. Okay, this is what we need to do, and we plug in AI, and it says this is how you should put together that email. That is extremely efficient for us. So it is great to use, but I do see it from your perspective, from the space you're in, that AI can spit out incorrect information. And if I'm going from an AI system directly to publishing without anything in between, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a big problem. And I think any respected news organization is not doing that. And I think that I spent a lot of time listening to podcasts and studying how AI is being used by different newsrooms. SEO, things like writing SEO headlines, is incredibly useful through AI. So we have a tool that's built into our website, into our CMS, so the back end of our website, that helps us make sure that the headlines and the title tags and things that you don't see but help us,
Totally
in that distribution process.
What does SEO stand for those in our audience that don't know?
Search engine optimization. So the ability to make content that's on our site appear in searches on Google or Bing.
So important.
Versus search engine marketing, which is where you pay. So a marketer, news organizations generally don't pay to place. You may pay for like subscription marketing or maybe some acquisition in terms of email signups, but we don't generally pay to promote a news story. And so the SEO, making sure that our stories are written containing content that is going to be interesting to the search engines, helps us attract more of an audience to our pages.
I think that's all brilliant. I could talk to you all day, and I hope to have another chance to do so. It is great to sit and talk with you. I love hearing about the work you're doing. We need you to be successful. We really do. And so we love that you're here, and we love that you're covering the local.
No, I appreciate you guys looking at the space, and I just want to reiterate something that you just touched on, which is we need everyone to be successful in the space. And so I think that one of the things that I try to do with our partnerships, being in my role at the press club, is make sure that we need more readers across the board. So there's a saying I heard early on in this was that newspapers can't succeed by writing stories about newspapers failing. And so when you ask me about the macro level of what's happening in the industry, it's critically important that we have more readers. And so I appreciate you guys just taking the time to highlight local news, the local media industry, and thanks for reading, thanks for being an advertiser, and thanks for supporting all of our advertisers.
Yeah, well, it's what you're doing is great, and I think of something. My mother-in-law is in assisted living in the Dunwoody area, and when I walk into her facility, your reporter's always on the front little credenza before you go through that security gate. And I think it's brilliant, right? Yeah. It's another way, and it's a service that people that are coming in, they want to know what's going on with Dunwoody, they can pick that up. So I think that's great. Where can people find out more about you and about all of your publications?
Yeah, so we have a website, which is roughdraftatlanta.com. That's the best place. I think signing up for our newsletters, you can do that at the newsletter tab on roughdraftatlanta.com, or you can text the word draft to 66866, and that will send you a link to sign up as well.
66866. Text draft. That's it. Well, that's what I will do, because that's really easy. And I don't know that I'm getting your newsletter. I hate to say, I will definitely sign up. And you should too, because you just heard how great that newsletter is daily. So we'll all sign up. Thanks for coming out and seeing us. And it's great to see you out at the chamber events and all the other places. So you are definitely very engaging, and we appreciate that. So thanks a ton.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. And thanks for all of you for watching the Dunwoody Dialogues. I am Mark Galvin. This show is produced by Discover Dunwoody. Our producer is Madison Holtz. Our sound technician is Emily Inser Gibson. And we always want you to know that we have Dunwoody stickers for all of you, and they are absolutely free. You can get them at the City Hall. You can go to NFA Burger. Oh, no, I brought up Billy again. You go to NFA Burger to pick these up, the library, or even our office. But the 4th of July is probably the best place to get these because we'll walk down the street in the parade and hand out a ton of our Dunwoody stickers. Once again, thanks for watching us here. You can catch us on all of our social media channels at Discover Dunwoody or right on our website, discoverdunwoody.com. Well, Keith, thanks again for joining us. It was good to see you.
Thank you.
Probably
We'll
have
see
you
everyone
back
at the
again.
parade as well. We'll be.
You're gonna be on the, oh, you
We'll
are.
be at the
You're
end
the
of the
big
parade.
sponsor of the parade.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look at that. And we appreciate that too. To all of you, thanks for watching. And now go out and discover Dunwoody.